Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Faith and Family First Show. I am your host, Eva Andrade, and I'm here with the beautiful Lani Kaaa. And we are going to be talking to you, those listeners and watchers that have not taken the time to pick up the ballot that was mailed to you.
Yeah.
It was mailed to you. It may be sitting on your desk. It may be in the rubbish can. It better not be in the rubbish can, but if it is, or if it's in another room, or you just even forgot that it came in, we're going to be talking to you today. But we also have some encouraging words for those of you that already did vote. So let's chat about that. Lani,
thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you. Well, first of all, because I've known you for a long time, and I know that you have the same passion I do, which is we better not be again on the lowest.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
That's right.
We've got to break the 50% mark.
Oh, come on. I mean, let's prove the pollsters
wrong. The 70% mark.
We have to prove the pollsters wrong. Okay, let's have Hawaii turn red. Wouldn't that be hilarious?
Wouldn't that be great? Really. Not slow.
No,
purple,
just automatically. Like,
red.
what just happened? Because if my memory serves me correct, did Hawaii not vote for Reagan?
They did.
When?
They did. And we've seen a turn. I mean, honestly, when you look at the layout of our state right now, not even talking about the national elections, but even in our state elections, we've gone in the last 20 years, we were up, where we had a voice, if you will, and then really none. I mean, there was a time when we had 0 senators, which is just, unheard of in the states. Now we're seeing that we have 6 Republicans, but more important than that is they're young, they're committed, their convictions are there, they're fearless in what they're doing, they're standing up when no one else will, and they're ready to be in it for the long haul. So I'm excited.
Well, exactly. So if you're listening and you're watching and you're like, okay, I already voted, I voted Democrat or I voted Republican, okay, whatever, but we want to talk to the 20% that hasn't really picked a side, or maybe they feel like they've got to hold their nose and pick a side, because you and I have looked at those numbers, and there's like 20% that don't feel like either party really speaks to them. So let's have a message to them. But before we jump into that, I know who you are, and I know that some of our listeners know who you are, but just in case there's somebody, who is Lani? What is your background? And tell us about the Leadership Institute.
Sure. The Leadership Institute hired me in 2023 to be the state director. What it is a training organization for conservatives. It's a nonprofit. It's a nonpartisan, similar to Hawaii Family Forum. And we are here to train community advocates, all the way from candidates, campaign managers, people who want to advocate for issues. We are conservative, but we don't check your card at the door before we let you into our workshops. We've been doing workshops now for the last 2 years. We've done over 60. In 2 years, which is crazy amazing, by the way.
Yeah, and don't be shy. Tell us how many people have passed through in Hawaii, have gone through your training. I know you know this number.
Yeah, at this point, we're looking at almost 1,500.
Yeah, that is amazing.
Right.
I mean,
and
these are people,
everything.
I've been to them. I mean, this is really good stuff. People are learning. You're around other people that maybe have the same passions, right? You're getting good information.
Yeah. One of the great things I think about Leadership Institute, which I have enjoyed, because I have definitely been on the partisan side, started as a Democrat, turned into a Republican. Not many people go that route. Most people go the other route. I'm a little crazy that way, but what I think really happens at our workshops is the playing field is level. There is no partisan conversation. There's mechanics we talk about.
Right.
There's the why we talk about. There's, the processes and the tools that you can use. So we don't really get into partisan and policy conversations, which usually are the things that sort of divide us and cause conflict. And so we are building bridges. We are building relationships. And I feel there's somewhat of a movement going on at Leadership Institute when we put on our workshops.
I'm glad that you guys are there, because as you know, in fact, I know you're going to laugh when I say this. You know that we have an election coming up next week.
We do.
Next week, Tuesday, everyone is going to be, for those that want to vote in person on election day, there are still those people,
Yes,
right,
there are.
that feel passionate about that. That's great. but there's some that have already voted and they've already put it in the mail. But today, you like to, when we've done these trainings, you tell me today's like the day. It needs to go in the mail today.
It needs to go in the mail today, November 1st. If your ballot is not in the mail or in the hands of the Office of Elections by 7 p.m. on November 5th, it will not be counted. So while it is not a hard deadline, we definitely feel that, or I've been advocating that by November 1st, put your ballot in the mail to make sure that it's counted, because poho, right? If you put all of your, time and effort into filling it out and you put it in on the 4th and they get it on the 7th and they put it in the trash. So November 1st, today is the day that we absolutely have to put our ballots in the mail. Other than that, if you haven't yet, then you're going to walk it in. You're going to drop it at a ballot box in your district or area, or you're going to walk it into a voter service center.
So I want you to address something that I've heard a lot, and I was really appreciative of the recent trainings that Leadership Institute put on, of which I got to play a part.
Yes, you did.
It was so fun.
That was awesome.
So thank you. But one of the things I really appreciated about this, right, is that you talked about the things, the responsibility of voters, right, that they actually need to get out there and vote. But some of the questions people were asking, we have come across people that feel like that the system in Hawaii is rigged, right? And they're complaining. They're like, no, you have to go in and vote because of this or whatever. And, you've got some really good manao about that very instance. So why don't you share that?
First and foremost, I think we have to vote regardless. There's so many conflicting rumors, if you will. Even things that might be true, but most of it's on the mainland. I've been around the system long enough to have talked to a lot of people who work within it, have good friends actually who run it. I really don't think there is as much corruption as people might think on the back end. And what I mean by the back end is from the time you get your ballot to the time it gets back to the Office of Elections. I think Hawaii, unfortunately, because we have been a one-party system, has a very corrupt pre-mail out system.
Right.
In fact, Heritage Foundation found us last year to be the worst when it comes to election integrity, not because of what happens after the ballots go in the mail, but the 31 reasons why our laws allow for corruption in the election process. So I always tell people when they say, but it's corrupt. I said, well, here's the problem with that. If we don't get more people in it who will uncover and be transparent about what's happening throughout the process, we will never change the entire process. So, argue, if you will, about the back end, but put in your ballot to make sure that we have a chance to get the presence that we need in order to address some of these laws that really are corrupt. And I could go through them, but that's an entire half hour.
I know. No, but I think what is helpful is, the other thing that I think a lot of people don't know is the process. So I think explain to people. So, this whole thing about, one part of the ballot goes here and another part of the ballot goes there and that double, because I think that that's a really good system.
Yeah. So when you mail in your ballot or you drop off your ballot, the first place that receives your ballot is your county elections division. Your county elections division, see, there's two envelopes. You put your inner ballot in a sleeve. That sleeve goes in an envelope. That envelope gets signed, sealed, and delivered.
You make a point with the sign that you got to make sure your signature stays inside of that box. If it goes outside of the box, it could kick it back.
Right. So what happens is the county division gets your envelope and they slide it through a signature check process. So it compares the signature on the envelope to the digital one. If that is correct, then that envelope moves on to the state elections, which is at the Senate, on the Senate floor. They open it up. They do the ballot. The double blind about that is that the county doesn't know whose ballot is in that envelope. The state doesn't know where that ballot came from because they're not getting the entire outside and inside envelope. So there is a double blind system that I think is pretty, helps to keep the corruption at a minimum. Obviously, there are things about, mailing multiple ballots to one address. There's all kinds of missteps. But when it comes to the process of counting the ballot, I think there's a pretty integrous process going on here in Hawaii.
Yeah, because I know when I hear of people that are maybe a little worried about the system, it seems like there are normal problems And then there's one that maybe wouldn't be normal. Like, for instance, people pass away all the time.
Right.
And so it's a system. Obviously, some people are going to fall through the cracks. I know that some people have complained that their college student who left 6 years ago is still getting ballots. Right. But, my question is, are you notifying the Office of Election then?
Right.
That the person no longer lives there. I mean, so I do think that there is probably maybe some things that fall through the cracks, but is that the problem of Office of Election? Are these just normal?
They're normal. You're right. If you didn't get your ballot or your ballot's returned for it, if you didn't get your ballot, I do want to address that because people do come up with that concern a lot. Right. It didn't come in the mail. Most of the time, the first question I ask them is, did you move? Because it is your kuleana to tell the Office of Elections that you changed your address. You cannot forward that ballot to a new address. It does not work. So you have to change your address. Now, if you didn't at this moment, the best thing for you to do is to go into the voter service center and pull a ballot and vote in person, because you're never going to make it to November 5th if you haven't by now.
Right. I mean, the hourglass has already turned and the sand is starting to go through. So if this is Friday, November 1st, and you're hearing this and you have not gotten your ballot, then they need to be doing that. Go in person. Because 2 weeks ago, I got a text notice saying, your ballot has been mailed.
Yes.
If you do not get it by the 18th, and it told me what to do. So obviously I was expecting to get my ballot. Right. So you're right. There are steps we have to take to make sure that our vote is counted.
Yeah. And then secondly, if you haven't registered, that's the other thing I hear from people. I'd like to vote, but I haven't registered. Well, if we're sitting here on November 1st and you haven't registered, guess what? Hawaii has had since 2018 a law on the books called same-day registration. So you can go into the voter service center with an ID, you can register and vote at the same time and be counted. So at this point, there's hardly any excuse for somebody not to vote. If you really want to vote, you can register and vote on the same day. You can get a ballot. If you haven't gotten your ballot and you're registered already, you can go in, they'll find your ballot and you can vote.
I know. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, there are times to pick a fight, right?
Yeah.
Right now, we have a few days left until election. The important thing is getting your ballot counted.
Absolutely.
So you're registered. If you're not, you can get registered. You cast that ballot. So again, for the 92nd time, go get it off of the counter or on wherever you put it and hit off the coffee table. I always laugh because in one of the workshops we did, you said, they make it so easy. You could sit there in your bathrobe.
That's right.
And I the visuals I had there of people sitting there. I was thinking, wow. But hey, you're right though.
Right.
It's so easy. It is to be able to. You have to do nothing. And I love it. I think it's good for us to remind people again. I'm doing the excerpts from the Leadership Institute for a reason. Okay. Because if people are listening and they're like, this is kind of interesting. Right. Well, they got to sign up.
They got to sign up.
So they got to know these workshops when they're coming, right? So
one thing I do want to say too is, mail-in balloting has become a discussion. But look at it this way. Before, you used to get your ballot or you'd go to the poll place. You'd go into a little booth by yourself and you'd have to figure it all out on your own, right? And then I had secret people calling me on their cell like, girl, what do I do, right? But today you can, as an entire family, as an entire small group of friends, you can bring your ballots together. You can talk about these things. You can look at the candidates together. You can really discuss some of the conflicting or questions that you have before you vote. That hasn't really been possible until mail-in balloting. And you absolutely can do that. You absolutely can do it together as a group. In fact, you can take your group's ballots as long as they're sealed and you can turn them all in at one time. So, there's some real benefits that I don't think we've we've really taken advantage of. I know for my family, we sit down at dinner and we go through it all, and my two sons, my husband and I, and we vote as we will. Of course, I don't tell my kids how to vote. Of course, sort of. But
well, our lives and what we believe should be what's telling our kids. And in fact, this, we've said this to pastors, right? Pastors, if they're preaching the unadulterated word of God without fear, then people in the pews are going to be filled with the knowledge that they need in order to make the right decisions.
Correct.
Without them having to say, vote for candidate A or candidate
Correct.
B or whatever. And besides, we know sometimes that even sometimes pastors may be a bit confused.
Right.
Right. Because looking at this election right now, right, there's a whole bunch of Christians. There's I don't know, Protestants for Harris, right? There's, Catholics for Trump. I mean, it's really interesting, right, that there's all these different Christian groups, because the point that you make in a lot of these is that the Christian vote is important.
It is
and
very
if
important.
It wasn't important.
Exactly.
We wouldn't be courted as much as we are.
Exactly. We absolutely are courted. I don't think Christians realize the power that they have. Of course, we have the power in Jesus Christ, but we also have the power in the vote. I mean, there is a reason why, it comes down to the faith community. We are the largest union in the state, in the nation.
Yep.
And if we were to unify as a union, it'd pretty much be unstoppable. And that's what we want to be. We want to be somebody that they concern themselves about, because that alone withholds some of the bad policy that is going to affect us.
Right. That's what they tell me when the legislative session rolls around, and they're like, how can we keep having to fight these bad bills? I'm like, because we keep putting the same people in office, right? We expect there to be a difference when it's the same people doing public policy. Now, I think we need to talk to, so Barna recently with the Cultural Research Center, they released some numbers that is very depressing to me. Yeah. They're saying that only 51% of born again believers are planning to vote, which means 48% are not going to vote. And their reason, which for those that have heard our workshop or heard some of this is going to sound familiar to them, but the reason they're not voting is because lack of interest.
Right.
They don't have enough information on the candidates. They dislike both major candidates. They don't feel like their vote is going to make a difference. And some of them, 50% of the ones who said they're not going to vote, say it's because it's too controversial. Right. Well, first of all, I checked the Bible. And I couldn't find in there where it says if it's controversial, get out.
Don't worry about it.
Right. I mean, for some reason that's not in there. But the point is that for those people, so if anyone's listening who's in that category, I think we need to talk to them because their vote could make or break or shape the next 4 years.
Yeah. I mean, we absolutely have abdicated our role, I believe. And I think there's a resurgence of the need for us to truly stand up and stand for the word of God. I think we need to stand in the gap because the wall is broken. They talk about the watchman on the wall. Well, when you stand in a gap, it's because the wall has been broken. And so I think that wall has been broken. We're not asking for the vote so that the church can jump into politics. That's not what we're saying. But the politics has jumped into the church.
Oh, absolutely.
And
when the government tells pastors what they can and cannot preach, when Christian doctors are told what they can and cannot do, when people are told to mask or not mask, or what is essential services and all of that.
Right. And, there was nothing more evident than, the fear that came up when we walked through the pandemic and what do we as a church need to do to address some of that. I think we really have to continue to be bold in our statements. I'll be honest. I mean, when we've done our workshops, we've talked about the 5 most egregious laws and bad policy that Hawaii as a state has put forward. And we also talk about this. You have to look at both the principles, but also the plans and the policies, right? And what we tend to do is discuss the principles. All those excuses is what I call them, unfortunately, are principle based.
Right.
If you went one deeper and you talked about what are the policy differences of these two candidates, do I align with one or the other? That becomes a very easy decision relative to the principles, because there is no perfect candidate.
Right.
There is no perfect president. There is no perfect pastor. There is no perfect person.
Right.
But what we look at is what do they stand for, and can I align with that?
Yeah. And then, and what do they tell you they're going to do? Because that's the other thing, when we talk about the difference between principle, policy, and plan, and we're looking at, their policies are easy to follow.
Right.
People in office right now, you can go see what they've done, which goes back to these 5 issues that you talked about that we present. And Hawaii Family Forum put out a a voter record, so you can see how the legislators voted on issues. So go to our website and check it out. So because that goes to their policies, that goes to what they've done.
Right.
Now, plan is what they're going to do, right? And I went to both the the Harris website and the Trump website, and they both have plans listed of what they're going to do. Now, what's interesting is I saw on both sides that there's a bunch of plans that I can agree with, and there's a couple of plans that's not so sure. Right. But it was clear to me which one was really moving the canoe in the right direction.
Correct. And myself included. Yeah. And, when we talked about the 5 policies we covered policies that I think as a body of Christ, as people of faith, that we should pay attention to. We talked about pro-life issues. We talked about legalization of recreational marijuana, and what does that say? In our community, parental rights for our children, and are we as parents abdicating them? We absolutely have. If you look at the laws that Hawaii has passed recently with regard to that issue, and the reason is because there's no checks and balances as to what's going on. And honestly, in our workshops, when we tell sort of the truth about what's happening, people are shocked. First of all, and what's the second shock of it is, that person that I've been voting for 10 years introduced that legislation. That person I voted for 10 years and was a supporter of that legislation. It surprises them.
And because you've been doing a lot of this for a long time, right? When you get those polished postcards in the mail from your candidates, and they talk about how they care about the community, right? And there's a picture of them picking up trash. Right. And there's a picture of them waving their beautiful signs and rocking their swag, right? Funny how those don't say, here's all the issues. Now, I got to say, my representative is Lauren Matsumoto, and she puts a list on every,
Absolutely.
She doesn't list everything she's voted on because that'd be a lot, but she's pretty open about even some of the controversial ones on how, and that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see more bravery.
More of that. Well, you know what I don't want to see anymore is I don't want to see voting based on how many sign waivers a candidate has. I that's one of my pet peeves is the sign waving. I mean, it's a phenomena only in Hawaii, but it tends to weigh so heavily in somebody's decision about whether they vote for this person or, I didn't see him sign waving.
And I have to laugh because sometimes now when you're driving by, the sign waivers are not there, but they have bags of trash that have their names on it, right? Like we clean, and I'm like, how about we clean up the trash in the legislature? Right. How about we clean up that trash? Because I think that makes, let's start there. But it's really interesting because one of the things that I did appreciate though about this gap thing, and I think because this will go to your portion of the talk that you do when we do our trainings. And so they said, what would make you vote? So they asked these people, tell us what would make you go out and vote. And Lani, you're going to love these. Okay, so what they're saying is that they would vote if their church taught them that voting is a biblical responsibility for every Christian.
Ouch.
I know. How's that? And 1 out of 7 said that they would be likely to vote if family or friends convinced them of the importance of voting.
Absolutely.
They would vote if the election was so close that they believed that their vote might actually make a difference. Or, and I love this, if they received an unbiased, objective briefing about what each of the major candidates supports and opposes.
Yep. And we have gotten more and more of that. There is more opportunity. If you Google, if you look online, there is so much opportunity to see the real differences, to watch your candidates debate here in the state of Hawaii. I'm pretty thrilled about that because we didn't have that in the past. But what I want to say about that whole list is, wow, it doesn't take much for the body of Christ to get active. When we did our workshops, the entire end of the workshop was, how do we motivate, galvanize, energize our people in the church pews to cast their vote. And many churches have stepped up and really done something about that. They do talk about the importance of voting, the biblical importance of voting. No church is telling somebody who to vote for. Let's just start there.
Right.
No church, and everyone knows that is not right. We don't as Leadership Institute, and neither do you. Right. And neither do to our churches, we're all in the same legal framework.
Nor do we tell them what political party is better.
Correct. And we don't talk about that either. But what we do talk about is the responsibility of the Christian to understand their role. Because if we don't do that, who is going to stand up for the truth of the Word of God in the public square if we are not present at all? There is no voice.
Well, yeah. And I think that it's also a good reminder that anytime that there is an emergency here in the state of Hawaii, when there are lives at stake, when people need food, when they need help with rent, they always go to the church.
They do.
So we need to be paying attention to what the government, what kind of restrictions the government is putting on the church. Otherwise, the church can't be church.
That's right. That's right. And you know, it should be a two-way street. There should be a partnership going both ways. We can't just be there when there is a need to cover a gap.
Right.
And then, you know, we don't need you after that. We don't want to hear your voice after that. But what we do talk about in the workshop is I think churches don't realize just how much freedom they have to motivate the casting of the vote. You know, we have churches now that are literally talking about, we have churches that are asking their members to bring their ballots to church and praying over the ballots so that there is a spirit-filled moment that we can actually lift up to the Lord these ballots.
I thought it was so great. So one of my counterparts, I want to say it's Massachusetts. It's an M, so maybe Michigan, but I think it's Massachusetts. They have a Bring Your Ballot to Church Sunday.
There you go.
And they encourage, and basically they do what you just said. They pray, they fast. I want to give a shout out to Inspire Church. They got excited about this. They're doing this, but they're not the only ones.
They're not.
I'm getting more and more calls now from churches. Thank you, Lani, by the way. You've made my life super busy.
I didn't know if you liked me or hate me after this.
No, actually, I love it because, first of all, I'm passionate about it. But I'm appreciative that so many people are now coming up and saying, and I have to laugh. Don't you think it's kind of funny? You know, we never really thought of the principle, plan, and priority or policy. You know, I'm thinking, how sad is that?
Yeah.
That tells me that we've been functioning a long time on looking for the godly candidate.
Right.
And that'd be great if there is a godly candidate.
Right.
But unfortunately, we have to vote for what's been given to us.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, I think, some of the other things the churches are doing is they are having small group ballot night where they are having their members get together and talk about their ballots quite freely. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if we're sitting here at November 1st and we're about to have, general election on November 5th, one of the things I really want to stress is that competitive races are always decided by the 6 to 10% of voters who cast their vote at the very end. If it's a close race, which it usually is for conservatives in a blue state like ours, you're going to win by 100 to 200 votes max. That's just how it is. That's statistically true. And those 1 to 200 people are these independents, are people out there looking at this and not voting yet. And so when you ask yourself, will my vote really matter? Gee, it's only 3 days away. I'm sure it's too late. It absolutely is not, because it has been proven over and over again that competitive close races are decided in the last 3 days by voters who put their ballot in. So I want to encourage all voters who are sitting on their ballot, who are watching this right now, to get yourself and everyone around you who hasn't cast their vote yet to drop their ballots in a ballot box or to walk it into the voter service center.
Yeah. And that's a call to action right now, because, if you voted, that's great. Pat yourself on the back, but then look around, because you've got a family that there's some of them that may not have voted. So your job, 007, should you accept, or actually, no, that wouldn't be 007. That's Mission Impossible. If you should accept, is to make sure that all your friends and families have voted. And if they still are holding on to their ballots, tell them today, get it in the mail today or tomorrow at the absolute latest, but don't be waiting around to make that happen.
I also want to say that we have a lot of conservative faith-based candidates this year like I've never seen before. I really want to stress that. And so if you do a little bit of homework, it's not hard to find them. If you're in one of their districts, I strongly, urge you to put in your ballot, and anyone else you know in your district who hasn't, encourage them as well, because we have had a flood of conservatives who say, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to work as hard as I can because I believe I need to stand up. And we as the church need to support people who have heard the call and are standing up, because they're risking it all to do it.
That's right. And your job doesn't end, because the legislative session is right around the corner.
Right.
So after you vote, that's great, but be prepared for what's coming up in January. Stay tuned to Leadership Institute. Make sure you plug in. Lani, what is that website address?
leadershipinstitute.org.
And you can find out what kind of wonderful things that they're doing. Make sure you like this video, share, subscribe, hit that notification button so you know every time we upload a new video. And keep your hope lantern lit, because after the election, the world is going to need the promise of Jesus Christ, because that's the only hope that can bring healing to a world that will need him. So we'll see you all next week. Mahalo, everybody.